The prison floor suddenly broke open with a loud crack. Dust flew into the air. Guards jumped back as a cold wind rushed out from a dark hole beneath cell block C. Flashlights pointed into the opening, and nobody could believe what they were seeing. A tunnel. Not a small hole. Not a short escape route. It stretched deep into the ground, supported by wooden beams, with old electric wires running along the walls. There were tiny shelves holding empty food cans, worn-out gloves, rusty digging tools, and even hand-drawn maps. The tunnel was so wide that a person could walk through it without crawling. One guard whispered, This wasn't built in a few weeks." The prison warden climbed down carefully. His flashlight stopped on words carved into the dirt wall. Year 1. A few feet farther. Keep going. Then farther again. Year 10. Everyone stood frozen. The oldest prison engineer looked around in silence before speaking the words that sent chills through every person standing there. They've been digging this tunnel for 20 years. The room became completely quiet. 20 years. No alarms had gone off. No one had noticed. No guard had reported strange sounds. No inspection had ever found it. How could prisoners secretly dig a tunnel for 20 years without anyone discovering it? Then one officer noticed something even worse. Fresh footprints. Someone had walked through the tunnel only hours earlier. The prints disappeared into complete darkness. The officers looked at each other. Were the prisoners still inside? Had someone already escaped? Or was somebody waiting at the other end? Nobody knew. The emergency alarm echoed across the prison as heavily armed officers prepared to enter the tunnel. And then, a strange sound came from deep below. 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 Every flashlight turned toward the darkness. Someone, or something, was still down there. 20 years earlier, the prison looked very different. Stone Ridge Federal Prison sat far away from any town, surrounded by thick forests and rocky hills. It was one of the oldest prisons in America, built with heavy concrete walls and tall guard towers. People believed escaping from Stone Ridge was impossible. That belief made everyone feel safe. The prison held dangerous criminals, bank robbers, gang leaders, and master thieves. Every day followed the same routine. Wake up. Breakfast. Work assignments. Lunch. Count time. Dinner. Lockdown. Nothing ever changed. Or at least that was what everyone believed. Among the new prisoners arriving that year was a quiet man named Ethan Brooks. Ethan was different from the others. He never started fights. He never shouted. He never complained. Instead, he watched. He paid attention to everything. He counted how many steps guards took during patrols. He noticed which lights flickered. He learned which pipes carried water beneath the building. He memorized every hallway and every corner. Most prisoners laughed at him. "You're wasting your time," one inmate named Jake Turner said. "No one gets out of Stone Ridge." Ethan smiled. "Maybe not today." Jake laughed. "Or tomorrow." Ethan simply answered, "Sometimes the longest road starts with one step." Jake had no idea what Ethan meant. Weeks passed. Months passed. Ethan worked in the prison maintenance shop, where broken chairs, pipes, and old equipment were repaired. Most prisoners hated the job because it was dirty and boring. Ethan loved it. The shop gave him access to tools. Nothing large enough to dig with, but enough to think. He quietly collected broken metal spoons, bent pieces of steel, worn-out screws, and small wooden handles that other workers threw away. He never stole them all at once. Only one tiny piece every few weeks. No one noticed. At night, while everyone slept, Ethan looked at the concrete floor beside an old heating pipe hidden under his bunk. He tapped it gently. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was different. Hollow. His heart beat faster. The prison had been built over old service tunnels used during construction many years earlier. Most people believed they had been completely filled with concrete. But what if they hadn't? The next morning Ethan said nothing. For nearly a year he kept testing the same spot whenever nobody was watching. Slowly. Patiently. Never rushing. Then one rainy evening, while thunder covered every sound outside, Ethan finally slid a sharpened metal spoon into a tiny crack beneath the pipe. The concrete chipped away. Just a little. Behind it, there was empty space. He quickly covered the crack before anyone could see it. That night he couldn't sleep. He wasn't thinking about tomorrow. He wasn't thinking about next month. He was thinking about 20 years. The very next morning, another prisoner unexpectedly walked into Ethan's cell during inspection. His eyes locked onto the tiny pile of fresh concrete dust that Ethan had failed to clean completely. The prisoner slowly looked up. Then he smiled. "I know what you're doing," he whispered. "And if you don't let me help." He stepped closer. I'm telling the guards. Ethan realized in that single terrifying moment that everything he had planned could end before it had truly begun. Ethan stared at the man without saying a word. The prison hallway outside was filled with the sound of guards calling prisoners to breakfast. In just a few seconds, someone could look inside the cell. If the wrong person saw the concrete dust, everything would be over. The prisoner closed the cell door as quietly as he could. "My name is Daniel Carter," he whispered. "Relax. If I wanted to tell the guards, I already would have." Ethan did not move. "Then why are you here?" Daniel pointed at the tiny crack near the heating pipe. "Because I've been looking for a way out for years. And I think you just found one." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Ethan nodded once. "If you ever tell anyone, this ends?" Daniel nodded back. "If I tell anyone, I lose my only chance." From that day forward, they became careful partners. They never talked about the tunnel where anyone could hear them. Instead, they spoke in simple code. Need more books meant they needed stronger tools. The weather is changing meant guards had changed their patrol schedule. Long winter ahead meant they had to stop digging for a while. No one around them understood. Weeks turned into months. Every night, after lights out, Ethan and Daniel worked for only 20 or 30 minutes. They never dug longer than that. Digging too much would create too much noise and too much dirt. The hardest problem was not making the tunnel. It was hiding the evidence. Each handful of dirt had to disappear. Some dirt was mixed into the prison garden where inmates grew vegetables. Some was hidden inside broken walls during repair work. Tiny amounts were flushed away over many months. Nothing happened quickly. Everything happened slowly. One careful step at a time. A year passed. The tunnel was only a few feet long. Daniel laughed one night. "We've worked for a whole year." Ethan smiled. "And we're still inside the building." Most people would have quit. They didn't. The years kept passing. Some prisoners finished their sentences and left. Others were transferred. New faces arrived. Old faces disappeared. But Ethan and Daniel remained. Only prisoners they completely trusted were ever invited to help. The first was Michael Reed, an electrician who understood wiring better than anyone in the prison. The second was Ryan Foster, a carpenter before he went to prison. He knew how to build wooden supports that would stop the tunnel from collapsing. The third was Noah Bennett, who worked in the kitchen. Without asking questions, he quietly saved empty food cans that later became containers for dirt and supplies. No one else knew the full plan. Each person knew only what they needed to know. Years passed. The tunnel became longer. Wooden beams held up the ceiling. Old batteries powered small lights. Fresh air reached the workers through narrow pipes hidden inside unused plumbing. It was no longer just a hole. It had become a secret underground passage. Still, they never rushed. Every sound mattered. Every mistake could destroy everything. One careless strike with a tool could echo through the concrete. One missing spoon could start an investigation. One loose board could expose the entrance. So they worked with endless patience. Sometimes weeks passed without a single minute of digging because guards were searching cells more often. Other times they made excellent progress. Good days. Bad days. Highs. Lows. Year after year. The prison itself also changed. New wardens arrived. Old guards retired. Security cameras were upgraded. Cells were painted. Buildings were repaired. Yet somehow nobody ever discovered what lay beneath cell block C. 20 years after Ethan first pushed a spoon into that tiny crack, the tunnel stretched hundreds of feet underground. It curved beneath fences. It passed under an old drainage system. According to Ethan's hand-drawn map, only one final section remained before they reached the forest beyond the prison walls. Daniel could hardly believe it. "We're actually going to make it." Ethan looked at the map. "Don't celebrate yet." The closer they came to freedom, the greater the danger became. One mistake now would erase 20 years of work. So they became even more careful. Then something unexpected happened. A brand new warden arrived at Stone Ridge Federal Prison. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. Unlike the previous wardens, she believed old prisons always hid old secrets. Within her first week, she ordered a complete inspection of every building, every basement, every maintenance tunnel, and every forgotten storage room. The prisoners watched as engineers arrived with new equipment. Ground scanning machines. Concrete testing tools. Long inspection cameras. Daniel's face turned pale. "They're going to find us." Ethan looked calm, but inside he felt the same fear. 20 years. Everything they had built could disappear in a single afternoon. The inspections continued for days. Every morning, officers came closer to cell block C. Every evening, the prisoners waited in silence. Then late one afternoon Ethan heard heavy footsteps stop outside his cell. A guard unlocked the door. Behind him stood Warden Sarah Mitchell, and two engineers carrying a strange machine. The machine let out a loud electronic beep as they rolled it toward the exact spot beneath Ethan's bunk. One of the engineers frowned as he looked at the screen. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'm getting a large empty space under this floor." The engineer stared at the screen. The machine kept beeping. Beep, beep, beep. "There is definitely an empty space under this floor," he said. Warden Sarah Mitchell looked at Ethan. "What is under your cell?" Ethan shrugged. "I don't know, ma'am. This prison is older than I am." The warden wasn't convinced. "Move the bed." The guards quickly pulled Ethan's bunk away from the wall. They searched every inch of the floor with flashlights, tapping the concrete with heavy hammers. Daniel watched from the next cell, barely breathing. One wrong hit. One small crack. 20 years of work would be over. Then something unexpected happened. One guard accidentally dropped a toolbox. The loud crash echoed through the hallway. At that exact moment, an alarm sounded from another part of the prison. A fight had broken out in the cafeteria. Guards rushed over their radios. All available officers respond immediately. Sarah looked frustrated. She had no choice. "Secure this area. We'll finish the inspection tomorrow morning." The officers locked Ethan back inside his cell and hurried away. The moment the hallway became quiet, Daniel whispered through the vent. "We're out of time." Ethan nodded. "They'll uncover the entrance tomorrow." That night, the 5 men gathered inside the tunnel for what they knew could be their final meeting. A small lantern lit the underground passage they had spent 2 decades building. The wooden supports were still strong. The air pipes still worked. Every mark on the walls reminded them of another year they had survived. Year 1. Year 5. Year 10. Year 15. Year 20. Ryan ran his hand across one of the wooden beams. "I never thought we'd actually finish." Michael checked the old batteries one last time. "They won't last much longer." Noah quietly handed everyone a small backpack filled with food, water, and warm clothes. No one smiled. They all understood the risk. If they stayed, the tunnel would be discovered by sunrise. If they left, they could spend the rest of their lives running from the law. Ethan looked at each man. "No one has to come." Daniel answered first. "I started this with you. I finish it with you." One by one the others agreed. Without another word they began walking. The tunnel stretched farther than anyone could remember. They passed old support beams they had built years earlier. They crossed narrow sections where only one person could fit. They stepped over tiny streams of water that had slowly formed underground. Hours passed. Finally Ethan stopped. Only a thin wall of dirt remained. He raised the small shovel they had used since the beginning. Everyone held their breath. One careful strike. Another. Then another. A cool breeze touched their faces. Fresh air. Real fresh air. Ethan pushed away the last handful of dirt. Moonlight poured into the tunnel. For the first time in 20 years, they could see the forest outside the prison walls. No fences. No guard towers. No concrete. Freedom. One after another, the 5 men climbed out of the tunnel and disappeared into the trees. By sunrise, the morning inspection began. The engineers returned to Ethan's cell. This time their tools broke through the hidden concrete cover. The floor collapsed, revealing the massive tunnel below. Officers rushed inside with flashlights, shocked by what they found. Wooden supports. Old tools. Food cans. Maps. Carved dates showing 20 years of work. The prison entered full emergency lockdown. Search teams flooded the surrounding forests. Roadblocks were set up across nearby highways. Helicopters circled overhead. Police searched day and night. Within 3 days, Ryan, Michael, and Noah were found hiding in an abandoned cabin. They surrendered without a fight. Daniel was captured nearly a week later after asking a stranger for help, not realizing the man's brother was a retired police officer. But Ethan Brooks was different. He had planned every step long before he stepped out of the tunnel. Investigators later discovered hidden supply caches along old hiking trails and maps leading to several possible escape routes. He had prepared for years beyond the tunnel itself. Despite one of the largest manhunts in the region's history, Ethan was never found. The tunnel beneath Stone Ridge Federal Prison became one of the most talked about security failures in the country's history. Engineers studied it. Prison officials rewrote inspection rules. New scanning technology was installed in older prisons across the nation to help prevent similar hidden construction projects. To this day, people still ask the same question. How could 5 prisoners secretly dig a tunnel for 20 years without anyone noticing? The official reports explained the engineering mistakes and security failures. But they could never fully explain the patience, discipline, and secrecy that made such an extraordinary crime possible. And somewhere beyond the forest, the mystery of Ethan Brooks remained unsolved.